So, hello and welcome to Handmade Oxford Online, the interactive virtual craft fair running from Wednesday the 15th to Sunday the 19th of September 2021. Now, it's a lovely mix of exhibitor led live sessions, daily auctions, and the chance to go and buy all of our exhibitors' work direct from their pages. And you can do all of that from interact.handmadeinbritain.co.uk. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Edward Wild, who is a furniture designer who's going to be with us talking us through reviving traditional techniques for modern times. So it's really excited to be joined and to go through his work with him. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce him now. So hello, welcome Edward. It's really nice to see you. How are you?
Hello, thank you for the introduction. And yeah, I'm very well today.
Brilliant. Well, I can see that you've got some of your pieces, behind you. And so, what's really nice for me to start off with, if people aren't aware of your professional practice, how best would you describe it?
So I'm a furniture designer maker. So I design and make pieces of furniture, mainly freestanding furniture. And a lot of the work I do is commission based. A range of luxury boxes as well. So these can range from jewelry boxes, little occasional boxes, cufflink boxes, ring boxes, and they're a mixture of very beautiful woods and intricate work to create them. So yeah, it's a range of commission-led pieces and also one-off studio pieces.
So, we heard a lot about boxes. Is there something that you particularly enjoy doing? Is it something about an enclosed space, or is it actually the size that you can achieve through doing your boxes?
It's a real mixture. Boxes are, I definitely enjoy making boxes. I know some colleagues, other furniture makers, can't stand them and hate them, but I really enjoy them. It's the intricacy of the work, and also that you can use on a box a highly figured, very beautiful small piece of timber that would be lost, or wouldn't look right on a whole tabletop or something like that. But when it's shown off on a small piece such as a box, it really comes into its own and can really be shown off and really beautiful. And making a box can sometimes be, it's a bit of fun, a bit of a challenge, because as you work through the box from the outside to the inside, it gets more and more intricate, which means that the precision of making's got to be very high. Otherwise, the whole piece doesn't work. So, yeah, they're good fun. It suits the sort of work I like doing. But I have to say, I really enjoy the transition between working on a really large piece of furniture, a desk or a table or something like that, and then doing a few boxes, which are very small, very precise, and very intricate.
When we start to do, your smaller, intricate pieces, is that really when technique shines because there is really nowhere to hide when people start to pick up and really look at the pieces? What do you
Um,
enjoy about
uh,
technique?
I think with that, the technique comes through in everything. Whether it's still got to be as precise as a box, because a lot of the work I do is quite detailed work, quite precise work. So see is there on everything, and there's never anywhere to hide. I think, but they're relatively fast to do. A box might take a week, up to maybe 3 or 4 weeks for some of the most complex ones. Whereas a desk or a table, there might be 3, 4 months involved in one if it's very involved. So I think it's quite nice working on something which is a little bit smaller, and you get the finish and the outcome a little bit sooner.
So talking about finish there, I think one of the things that we see through your work is techniques of veneering, and it's something that we wanted to pick up on today. Please do talk us through that.
So veneering's very interesting because you'll often see phrases like "no veneer here" and stuff like that, where people think that it's cheaper or poorer, but actually through history, whether we look at the work of the Egyptians, through into the Renaissance and the French court, and then into the UK with Chippendale and beyond, a lot of the very, very finest furniture in history has been veneered, because it's to do really good work. It's very, very precise and very detailed, and just cannot do in solid wood. I do quite a lot of sunbursts, so something like this box here, where we've got a pattern that explodes out from the middle of the box. Now that's not possible in solid wood because of the way that solid wood moves, and it ends up pulling itself apart because wood moves on a daily basis. And a lot of the work you do as a cabinet maker is to work with how the wood works, how the wood moves. And veneering allows you to do patterns and marquetry and all sorts of other things that are really not possible in solid woods. And doing it properly is very, very time consuming, but really, truly beautiful effects.
So we touched upon, patination. Where do you start with patination? Do you look at the colours of the veneer, or do you go in with, being influenced or already having a design in your head?
So sometimes you'll start off with a design and you'll find the appropriate wood to fit that design, or you've got an incredible piece of wood and it lends itself to a specific design or a specific process. And sometimes you're picking the wood to do something specific. Other times the wood talks to you and tells you sort of what it wants to do, in some ways. And I've got to say, it's a real pleasure to be able to work with wood, because it's such a beautiful, tactile, warm material to work with, and it lends itself to sort of specific forms and ideas, and directs you in certain ways.
Have you ever found that by doing that, you've actually arrived at something that you never thought you could, a complete change in direction in terms of the patination because of the challenges and the way that wood wants to work?
Absolutely. I think on occasions I'm very lucky. I have a brother who is a forester, so he's able to get me some incredible timbers. And sometimes you'll be working with a piece of wood and you open it up, so you saw it and you split it open, and you see something that you just haven't expected, and it directs you in a different direction. It means that you end up making something that you might not have intended to make in the past. And that has definitely happened. Certainly with one of the boxes I'm going to talk about today, when I was I was offered some laburnum logs, small pieces, and suddenly it opened up really thought about doing in the past. I knew what could be done, but it opens up your eyes to new possibilities.
So tell us a little bit of some of the traditional techniques, that you've been working on recently.
So one of the techniques I've been working on most recently, well, I say most recently, it's been about 10 years, but is oyster veneering. And that is where, instead of cutting wood along the grain, you cut across the grain. So if I give you a little example, I've got a lump of wood here, and most wood is cut lengthways along the grain. But for oyster veneering, we cut across the grain like this, and you end up with what are called oysters, which are bits of timber like this, and you can see it's quite thin, and it's been cut across the grain, so you can see the grain of the grain of the wood, and you can see the end grain rather than the long grain that you'd see with a normal piece. So yeah, I was offered some laburnum, which this is, and I'd seen oyster veneering on pieces of furniture from the sort of early mid 18th century, and I wanted to replicate it, but it became apparent very quickly that there were some problems. Firstly, there's very little written about the techniques of oyster veneering, and speaking to other cabinet makers around the country, it became apparent quite quickly that people had snippets of information, but certainly a lot of the techniques and the knowledge of how to do it had gone as people had died. So I had these logs, and I had to work out how to cut them and how to dry them. So the first problem, if we look at this big log here, you can see that it's cracked. It's cracked to pieces, and you couldn't do anything with it. All of these cracks coming out would mean that if you tried to cut it up, it will split and it will fall apart. So I had to work out, just put that on the floor. I had to work out early on how I could cut a section like this and dry it. And what I found is that you can cut them, and then you have to put them back together, clamp them back together, so that they dry incredibly slowly. So once I had the laburnum, I was able to cut it and dry it, but it took about 3 years to dry the pieces so that they didn't crack and crumble away. So that was part of the, I guess, the learning process of, if you're working with an old technique and a lot of the information on how to work with it's gone, then there's got to be a lot of trial and error to find what does work and what doesn't work. So that was stage one, and that took about 3 years just to dry the pieces. And then a piece like this, it's just too thick to work with. So the second stage of the process was thinning them down into something like this. So you can see, if I get that at the right angle, you can see some of the grain on it, but actually it's been thinned right down, and that's 0.8 of a millimeter. And when we were talking about veneering earlier, when working with veneers, tend to work with veneers that are 0.6, 0.8, a millimetre, 1.5 mil, or maybe up to 2 mil. So actually really quite thin sections. And once I'd cut the veneers, or cut the oysters down, which is what this piece is called, I then had to thin them down, create these thin sections, and then start putting the thin sections together to create a pattern. And the pattern largely sort of evolved its own way. So if I share my screen, I can show you the sort of piece that this then became. So you can see this is a box which has been veneered with the oysters, and you can see there's a pattern on the top, so they're all rounds which have been cut into and inlaid into each other, and then on the sides you've got the rounds as squares, which is a slightly easier pattern to do. So you can see the front view there. We've got the oysters there are cut into squares, and that's relatively straightforward, whereas the oysters on the top are cut into each other in circles. You can see a little bit of a detail there, and that's very time consuming because you're putting one over and over another. So that's one of the techniques that I've been working on most recently, and it's been a very, very sort of long-winded, slow technique, because there's been lots of trial and error, what works and what doesn't work. And certainly with the drying, it was finding out how to cut and how to dry these laburnum oysters so that they didn't crack and fall apart.
It's wonderful there. I've often looked at, the pieces and actually thought, how do you get those intricate circles? How do you fit them together? And it's lovely actually to see where they've come from, which is this very solid piece
Yeah,
monologue, and then really found down and then really refined even further to those really lovely pieces of oyster. I can now visualize so far better where that word, oyster comes from, because it not only looks, but even those small, very small pieces that have the shape
yeah.
as well that you would find. It's wonderful. I mean, how would you find out how to do something if it's not detailed anywhere?
That's the case of talking to a lot of colleagues, a lot of cabinet makers, people who are doing work that's in that sort of area and region, and finding out, lots of asking other makers. Oh, have you ever done this? Or do you know anyone that's done this? Or how would you try this? And things like that. It's the maker community, the cabinet makers are full of wonderful, talented people, and often there's the sharing of knowledge. What is sometimes sad is when someone's got a technique and they take it to their grave, and it's then lost and takes time to develop again. And then there's reading around, you'll find snippets in books and literature about techniques, but often they'll talk about the technique, but they don't go into any of the details. And then there's some trial and error, testing things, seeing if it works, testing again, until you have a process working really nicely.
Do you find that these processes, when you start putting them into your own work, are quite fast paced, or do they, start off slower and then you kind of get, faster as time goes on?
They definitely they get faster as time goes on. So whilst you're testing a technique, it can be really quite slow. But once you've got the process working, it then becomes a little bit faster. but you sometimes get some funny effects as well. So I was doing a technique a few years ago called you're creating what's called hair wood, which is a grey wood, and it's when it was used heavily in the 18th century, and you turn, usually it's sycamore, and you treat it with I think it's iron, ferrous iron oxide, I think, or ferrous iron sulfate. But it turns the wood grey, and you get this beautiful grey coloration to it. And I'd made a mirror that was I'd used ash wood, and I turned the ash grey, and it had a metallic look to it, almost like steel. And then I'd done a beating technique that looks like sort of planished metal on the surface. And I ended up having a row with a customer because not a full-on row, but the customer told me that the mirror frame was metal. I said, no, I can assure you it's wood. I've made it. And in the end, I had to take the mirror out of the frame at the back so that she could see it and could see that it was actually wood. She was astounded by it. And did buy it, so that was fantastic. But yeah, sometimes you get these quite interesting processes happen, or interactions where you're using a technique that was heavily used in the past and then's gone out of fashion, and you use it again, and people don't believe what it is. So that can be fun.
That sounds quite kind of in the end, if she bought it, but also to be questioned, and then to say no, to actually have all your work kind of questioned, but then actually to say no, it kind of sounds kind of worth it in some ways, because the technique has worked, and it's worked very well. I mean, there must be
Yeah,
some satisfaction,
absolutely,
in that.
definitely.
I mean, we've spoken about techniques, and we focused on one in particular, but you know are you kind of searching to revive more techniques, as your practice moves forward? Is that something, you enjoy, and will keep looking at reviving, older techniques?
I think definitely. If there's a technique out there, or there has been, and it's appropriate, then absolutely. But equally, using current techniques as well. The world of the cabinet maker, I think right now is one of the most wonderful times to be a cabinet maker, because we've got the history and the making behind us, which we can draw upon to use many techniques, which some go back many thousands of years. But we're also in an age of new technologies that open up other doorways. So I think for me, it's always the right technique for the right job. And whether it's reviving an old technique or working with a very cutting edge modern technique, it's a real sort of exciting time to be doing that, because you can achieve some really quite remarkable things.
Talking about achieving remarkable things, talk us through some of the pieces, that you have behind you. It'd be lovely to see one or two of those pieces close up.
I'll grab one of them if I can. Ooh, bring it over. So this is undoubtedly one of my favorite pieces, and if you go onto my page, you'll see this. And it's, if I open it up, it's a jewelry box. If I move back, you can see a bit more. It's a jewelry box with a sunburst on the inside. So this is a sunburst made out of 24 sections of wood that explode in this magnificent fashion. We've got a tray on the inside, which it's quite hard doing this watching the screen, but that lifts out and then floats gently back into place. And then we've got the same on the outside. We've got this dramatic sunburst, and it really is. This is lovely, which flows from the top of the box down onto the sides of the box. And that's a piece that I was lucky enough to get some of this beautiful, beautiful timber, which is black and white ebony, and that was back in the lockdown earlier this year. And I only had a very small amount, and it really sort of told me what it wanted to be, and it wanted to be this box. So it's a really special, really, really lovely piece. And then I'll just put this back. And then that contrasts with something like this. This is a small occasional box in rippled sycamore, and you might be able to see it's got a textured surface on the top here. If I can get it just right in the light, I think you can just see it there. And then we've got these little details on the corner, which are made from ancient bog oak. And then inside it's lined with very soft, very delicate pear wood. So two very different pieces, two very different boxes, but both really, really stunning in their own ways. And then we've got this piece here, which is another little occasional box, and it's got an effect, a beaten effect on the top. Again, you can see that there. And this is olive ash. So every so often, most ash is a very light color, but you get the odd trees which have this beautiful coloration to them. It's a sort of golden color. And the wood for this, I actually cut it when I was about 15 with my brother, and I made some furniture, very, very bad furniture. And I then took some of that apart a number of years ago and made have made a few boxes from it, including this little one here. So different timbers, but absolutely beautiful in how they look.
That's really, really beautiful. And we could see that little intricate detail on the top of your small occasional boxes. The way they catch their light, they're really stunning. It's like a shimmering effect. So Ed, as we draw our talk now to a close, one question that I'd like to kind of leave us with is why is it wood? Why is it that draws you to work with that every day and the enjoyment that you get from it?
I think that once you work with wood, it has a tactile property about it which draws you in. It's the way it feels when you hold it. It's got a warmth to it. It's got a tactile nature that just makes you want to touch it. It makes you want to feel it. And once you're drawn in, that's it. Forever. So I was quite lucky. As when I was young, my grandfather, cabinet maker, he made furniture, also taught a bit. So he introduced me to wood and working with wood. And then I think my interest in wood has developed in many different ways, including actually the trees that the timber come from. So I'm very, very keen on the trees. I've planted plenty, but hopefully during my lifetime we'll plant an awful lot more. And it's the whole story. So it's not just about the wood, but it's about the trees, how the trees grow, the different types of trees, the timber that you can get from those trees. And once you've started working with wood, it draws you in. It's such a tactile material to work with, but that's it. You can never not work with it because it's wonderful. It gives you incredible surprises. You cut a piece of wood open and you get this absolutely beautiful figuring, or you cut another piece open and it's rotten inside and it's absolutely awful. But it's exciting and it's interesting, and it's amazing that a natural product can produce beauty that is just unbelievable sometimes.
That's wonderful to hear. It really evokes kind of why you have this love of wood, and I'm really excited to see as the collection grows, and what you do in the future. So thank you so much, Ed, for joining us, and for all. You've been watching Edward Wild Furniture here at Handmade Oxford online, and I'd like to say a big thank you once again, Ed. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really lovely to get to know you and your collection a lot better. Thank you so much, for walking us through. That's been very kind.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.